Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Academy and our lecture. I say this welcome on behalf of the three organizing institutions, which are the Evangelischer Bund Hessen, the Protestant League of Hesse, which works in close cooperation with Protestant churches in Germany, promotes theological education and also interdenominational knowledge. And the second of our organizations is the Communion of Protestant Churches in Europe, CPCE, which is the place where I am working. My name is Oliver Engelhardt. The CPCE is an umbrella organization, a fellowship of 96 churches, Protestant churches throughout Europe, churches from different Protestant tradition. And the third one is the Center of Protestant Theology in Eastern Europe, CETO, which is based in Sibiu, Romania. And CETO has three areas of interest: theological education, encounter with orthodoxy, and interconnections of church and society. So these are the organizers of this meeting. Again, a very warm welcome to everybody. You already realized that we are recording this meeting. If any of you does not agree with recording, you can still take part, but you can hide by switching off your camera and your microphone and changing your name. But of course, we would prefer to see who we are talking to. Please, if possible, keep your cameras on, but switch your microphones off and switch them on only when you are talking. One more information which is very important for that we can do this Digital Academy. We got financial support from the European Union, from the program Erasmus+, and we are very grateful for that, because I think it would not be possible, at least in this way. I think this is all organizational matters, and I hope you all have a very good connection throughout the coming 2 hours. Our whole Digital Academy, the series of lecture, has the topic Protestantism and Participation. As we are connected to Protestantism, we think that already the Reformation in the 16th century can, to a certain extent, be read as a boost for the idea of participation. Reformation contributed to a bigger amount of participation among church members, switching language in liturgy to the language of the people, letting people read the Bible themselves, taking part in the Lord's Supper with bread and wine, and so on. Many things of the Reformation are about participation. In our Digital Academy, we want to ask for the role of churches today. Those of you who participated last time, which was 2 weeks ago, experienced Adrian Schleifenbaum, who is an expert about church as an actor in civil society. Today, we will hear about a theological concept which was developed in the Communion of Protestant Churches in Europe, which is called the Theology of Diaspora, and we will look for its relevance in questions of participation. But before we start, I think we got bigger our group, and it is a good idea to hear a little bit, or to at least give you some room to show something about you. So I would like to ask some questions and get your answers on that. So you find in the chat now a link to a Mentimeter where you have a question. And I would like to you to open this and answer. So we give you some time to open it and to read it. Okay. I hope we can show the results. Our question was, are you a member of a church which is constituting a majority in the society of your country, or of a minority church? And I can see that 2/3 are in a church which is a minority in the society of the country, and 1/3 as a majority. There was a third answer, if somebody would not be in a Christian church at all. It seems that this is not the case. Thank you. I would have a next question and invite everybody to take part in this. The next question is, I would like to get an overview from where we are connected here. The question is, from which part of Europe are you connected? From north, east, south, west, or from the central part of Europe, or even out of Europe? Please click again on the link in the chat and answer the question. I think this would not take too much time. And this is our result. As I expected, most of us feel themselves of being in the center. But interestingly, we have all parts of Europe also in the group. There's still something changing, and even one person out of Europe. Would you like to show up who is out of Europe? Melina, that's you? Okay. Well, interesting. We will be later in discussion groups where you can share more about your background. But let's take a third question, which brings us a little bit more into our topic of today. You have again the link to click on it. The question is, with which statement about Protestantism do you agree most? This needs a little bit more of considering, probably. The four possibilities are: a strength of Protestantism is its ability to transform itself. Or second, Protestantism has shown often that it is able to transform society. Or third, Protestantism is very diverse, therefore it is well prepared for a modern world. And the fourth, because of so many different traditions and distinct structures, Protestant churches can hardly play a decisive role in society. Please think about it and choose the statement which you agree most. Interesting that most of you choose the first possibility. A strength of Protestantism is its ability to transform itself. And the other statements are more or less balanced. Okay, thank you very much. I would like now to step into our lecture of today, and therefore I welcome Markus Hütter among us. Markus, could you wave so that everybody sees who you are. Your name is on the screen as well. Markus Hütter is from Austria and a member of the Evangelical Church of the Augsburg Confession. In Austria, he studied theology and was several years ago included or part of a study process of our communion of Protestant churches in Europe, and this process was called the Theology of Diaspora. So Markus is connected to this topic for quite some years. And during the last 3 years of preparation to pastoral ministry, he was also a special assistant in the head office of CPCE, where, among many other things, some of you may have experienced him in the last Digital Academy last year, but among other things, he edited a magazine about the theology of diaspora, which is entitled Rich Relationships. It looks like this. I'm not sure if you can see it. Oh, probably not. And the title is Rich Relationships, the Joint Task of the Church as Diaspora. Recently, in September 2022, Markus was ordained as a minister and is now serving in Graz, which is the second biggest city of Austria. So, Markus, welcome again, and we are glad and interested what you will bring to us. And now I hand over to you. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Oliver, for your warm word, and welcome and hello to all of those I don't know yet, whom I'm going to get to know now, and all of those who have been present the last time. Hello again. So yes, as Oliver said, I'm going to present you a concept which the CPCE developed and was lately published in what Oliver already shown, which is the last magazine of the Focus, which in my understanding plays a very important and active role for the matter of participation of Protestantism, because as Oliver already pointed out, the concept is called Rich Relationships, the Joint Task of Church as Diaspora. I'm going to share my screen now, and I hope that I can manage to do that, but that should actually not be any problem. Let's see. All right, you should be able to see it now, is that right? Yes, thank you so much. All right, so let me just start like this. So the concept is about the term and the narrative of being or be a diaspora, being in a diaspora. The question, the first one is, what actually is diaspora? What does diaspora mean? Well, the term has been out there for quite a long time. As some of you might know, it's also biblical. It does not appear too often in the Bible, but it is associated with being scattered. That is how usually the concept in the Bible is used, and it has been used for the longest time. And scattered is not a very positive meaning of the word. Scattered around the world, all over the world. In the sense of there was once a unity, there was once a whole entity which was now torn apart and has been spread all over the world. So, in other words, diaspora is in its origins and has been for the longest time more of a negative, more of a destructive concept, as being scattered in a negative sense. So diaspora can and is used among CPCE churches, not by all, but some of them use it very actively, like my church in Austria. It can either describe the situation of being in a minority, being scattered all over the country, or also it can be a self-image. So churches would understand themselves as a diaspora. We are a diaspora church. So it has these two connotations. It is legit for both senses of the word. As I said before, diaspora being scattered then in most times describes being in a minority, and that is something maybe not new, but there's a new evolving interest in the term of diaspora, because as or some of you might know from Germany, the numbers are also decreasing in Germany. So diaspora, first of all, being a minority, can be seen as a reality for most of CPC churches. Of course, as you know, CPC has around 94, please correct me, member churches. And most of them find themselves in a situation where they are in a country where either there's another denomination in a minority like Catholicism. There are only few churches where Protestantism is the majority. Think of Denmark, where the church is a state church. And not only is it that the most churches in Europe are Protestant churches are in the minority, it is also that Protestantism in general in Europe is in a minority. Europe has around, depending on what is Europe or how you define Europe, around 400 to 800 million people. More or less 50 million of them are Protestant, and only 21 million of them are based in Germany. So what does it mean for most of them to be in a majority? Well, that touches the question of members, of finances and influence. And it is not, as I said before, I wrote it here, it is a sociological fact. Yes, of course. But a lot of churches, and I can say that from the perspective of my church, it is not only a sociological fact, but is also connected with worries about the future and existential fears. Not only for those who are in a minority, but also for those who are becoming a minority. When members are decreasing, getting fewer and fewer people, which also has an effect on finances, there is less and less money. And also the rotating of influence. We used to be big and we used to be powerful. We used to have a saying in the society, as it seems, not anymore. And then questions arise like, how should we pay the salary workers? Who is going to do all the tasks, the jobs which have been done by people when we had more people and when we had more money? These are questions sometimes for churches. We are still in a minority, most of them in Germany, but the way is going to being a minority. So yeah, it is a sociological fact, but to be a minority or to become a minority can also be a specter, a nightmare, the nightmare minority as I put it. So it is a sociological fact, but it also plays a role on the psychological, on a psychological level. It can be a very powerful group psychological narrative, and that is something which is important, psychological fact and also psychological narrative. So being small, becoming fewer, becoming less and less important or influential, that also goes along a lot of times with sense of resignation, of lethargy, of disencouragement, of bitterness. And what happens when an organization is becoming smaller or is becoming challenged because of becoming less important or decreasing? Well, the first purpose of an organization is to maintain itself, so the self-preservation. In other words, it will try, this is sociological thinking, to preserve itself. In other words, what you can see in the past, it will try to get more together, to demark itself from the outer space, and sometimes the environment can be conceived as being hostile because it is the majority which is now becoming stronger and bigger against us, the church, who is becoming smaller. So there is a process sometimes going on of alienating, so getting out of the society instead of being part of the society to preserve oneself. Now, as I said before, and in the last time of the Digital Academy, we talked about the power of narratives. Some of you might remember that we said that we had a talk where we talked about narratives, and that narratives, of course, can be dangerous, and they have to be constantly challenged and criticized by, for instance, universities, which we all agreed on. But we also agreed on that narratives are very useful and very powerful because they give a sense of being on the same path of having something to do with each other. They can also tell a story which gives a vision, which also points towards the future and not towards the past. And that is something which Diaspora as a narrative is the idea of this narrative, of this concept of Diaspora. Well, in order to be a useful concept, Diaspora would have to do both. It would either have to bring a real contribution to the challenge, the problems which are connected to being in a minority or becoming a minority. So if we are getting smaller, if we're getting less, or if we are less, what shall we do? So that is a question which it has to address. But also it should help with this narrative, this psychological reality of, well, we are a reality or we're becoming a reality. What now? So what shall we do now? The new understanding of diaspora, as the way I understanding, and that is something, the concept as I understanding, is very fit for, it suits both of the problem and it gives answers. Because it has a great figurative concept power with many implications. So when you think of diaspora, it kind of tells a story with a lot of implications, not only for who you are, but where you are, why you are church, for whom you are church, how you can be church, and all these big ecclesiological and also church theoretical questions are implicated in the term of diaspora. It is a opportunity-oriented approach, other than a lot of approaches which we see now, which try to solve the problems. For example, we are getting smaller. How shall we cope with all these problems? It acknowledges the reality of such logical facts that being small or becoming smaller, but asks now for the task, well, what is church there for? So it also claims that it is an accurate ecclesiological self-understanding, which fits the description of the situation and leads to, which is our topic, participation. So as I said, the power of the concept lies in the word diaspora itself. Diaspora, diasporain, sporos in Greek, which means seeds and grain. And now the important part is the first one, the particle dia. Dia, of course, has a lot of meanings, as all of you probably know, but dia can also mean in the midst. And that is the clue of this concept. It is scattered, not all over, but into the world. So maybe a better word than being scattered, because it has this negative tone, is to be interspersed, which is an older word, of course. In German, for example, you say eingestreut, not zerstreut, for all those of you who speak German. And these are the two vital aspects of the concept, is to be scattered or dispersed into the world, right into it, among the world, to the people and to the world, and also not just because we think so, but because it has the claim that it is interspersed by God himself or herself or itself. So these are the two vital things. Why interspersed into the world, scattered by God? Well, to bear good fruit for others and church itself by virtue of the gospel, the good news. So here you have this task, this vision approach. So the concept claims to be a vision and focused approach. Well, if something is scattered into the world, it's to the people and into the world by God, well, that means that the very basis, as it is into the world, is relationship, since it is, by the very meaning of the word, connected to the world. It's not apart from the world, but it's connected to the world. So there is a fundamental relationship which cannot be undone in the if you adopt the concept of diaspora, between church and world, which is not anymore the surrounding or this other word, or maybe the hostile, or maybe the others, but it is our co-world, our sisters and brothers, not only the sisters and brothers in faith, but sisters and brothers by being humans, and also between churches. Why is that? Well, oh no, before I say that, so the important thing now, the task for church is not to look back. How was it? I mean, we have situations in Europe where churches have been in a minority for all the time. We have situations where churches have become a minority for a long time. Austria, again, as an example, 17th century, from 90% to, well, being forbidden for 200 years and becoming a minority of 3% now. We have the situation in Europe where, for instance, Lutherans in Romania, they used to be more than 100,000 and now decreased to, for certain circumstances, to more than 10,000. And also, as I said before, we have the situation that big churches like in Germany, most of them are becoming less and fewer. And that is also one intriguing part of the concept. It does not matter the numbers. So since it is focus-based and since it describes the normal state of church being in relationship with the world for the sake of others and for oneself, it is now the task to explore Ecclesia Semper Reformanda, ways to be witnessed in word and deed, not only word but deed as well, to the good news of God's universal will for salvation and love. That is one of the big claims of the concept. So, if you ask what is the meaning and the purpose of church as a diaspora, it is, since relationships are not, well, possible, but mandatory, since you are in the midst of the world, to actually acknowledge these relationships which you stand in and shape them in the sense of the following on from Christ. So in the Nachfolge in German. So all this concept of being a diaspora, understanding itself, oneself as diaspora, to be interspersed, to be scattered into the world, comes down to a phrase which had some background in Bonhoeffer, as some of you might know, to be church for others. But now, since you are interspersed into the world, it's not only for others. You probably, if you attended a theological study, you probably know about Bonhoeffer and the charismatic theology, that it had kind of this uneven, unleveled view. But it's with and for others. So it is not a patriotistic concept, but on the eyesight concept. So as I said before, relationship is the normal state of church. Well, as said before, let me go back here. Diaspora, as a concept, as I understand it, has a great, a very strong basis on connectivity, on communion, not only between the world which you are part of, and therefore you also bear all the problems and all the logics of the modern world. You cannot stand apart, but also between churches. Why is that? Well, because the connectivity or the communion of churches urges from the fact that the interspersion is the purpose of the church, of the one church. So in other words, when I said that the idea of diaspora is that God interspersed or scattered into the world, it means that it is not one form or one shape, one denomination in one country which is interspersed by itself, but that the very church which is interspersed is the Church of Jesus Christ. So that is, of course, an entity which is a belief entity, the Church of Jesus Christ. So no one can claim to be the church, the one form, the one shape of the Church of Jesus Christ, which is interspersed. All of them share all of the shapes and forms of churches as we see them now in Europe and all over the world. They share this interspersion with, because the Church of Jesus Christ is interspersed by God, not one denomination. Which of course then says one thing: diaspora is in itself and per se an ecumenical project. Because of course, if all of them share the dispersion of the Church of Jesus Christ, they have to work and see that they live up to this dispersion. In other words, the other churches, they become sister churches, not other churches, not other denominations. We, at least in Austria, had a long history of Catholicism and Protestantism working together, fighting each other, then the phase of where we were apart from each other and we left each other alone, and now more in the sense of working together and finding our ways together. And that is exactly what the concept is. One of the strengths of, is that it leads to connection and communion with others, but not only in the one denomination, but it has the claim to lead to ecumenical reality in all denominations. And of course, if it leads to communion, if it leads to connection, well, then of course also it leads to the idea of supporting each other instead of working against each other. It leads to learning from each other. And now I would like to ask Oliver, how much time do I have left? I have lost track on this time.
I wanted to ask you if 2 minutes would be enough, or do you need 5?
I need 5.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So that is, and again, we said about the diaspora, and the emphasis is that a lot of churches are in a minority, that as according to the view of diaspora, minority churches can also be seen not only as the poor little churches who have some problems, but who could be seen as an avant-garde, since they had a pioneering role, how to cope with little personnel, with little financial resources in an environment which is not on their side, let's put it that way, from the beginning. Minority churches actually learned for a long time. A dear friend of mine from Romania, pastor, once said, well, we had the fact that we lost so many people that we kind of died and then we resurrected. So now we said, okay, now we are a minority, what now? So kind of to find the focus, to prioritize what is important for us. What do we want to spend our money, our resources in it? But not only then, how can we increase these resources? So finding partners in the society, but also outside the society. Lots of projects which are not only resourced by the country itself, but with the help from other churches in other countries. This will come in the second part. And of course, networks. If you are small, well, you know, you are dependent on this network. So that is a big strength of the concept. So the concept tries to teach to focus on the polyphony of different relationships with others and to actually see them as richness, as relational riches as well, and an opportunity for the task which the church decides to do. Which the church decides to do, that is something, of course, diaspora is a ecumenical concept, but the decision what there is the task to do in the very country can only be done, or can only be, that's the decision of the church which is in the country. Maybe we can talk about that later. And that is something, the last thing I'm going to tell you. There is a special service at the concept and standard of the churches, which is building bridges for a lot of reasons. First of all, you have a very strong role model, which would be, well, Jesus of Nazareth himself, who, if you look at the gospel, built bridges in many different levels, not only to people, among people and God, but also for people themselves as individuals to becoming back to life, for example. So churches are also very strong in building bridges, since they have not only the concept of as a diaspora as being in a country itself, but also to be, as I said before, part of the interspersion of the Church of Jesus Christ. So networking not only in the country itself, but also on a national, international level. Churches themselves can and should become in the places of dialogue, places of connection, to embrace this role of being interspersed by God into the world. Building bridges, as I said before. And I think I'm going to leave it right there, because I think that we're the 5 minutes. Is that right, Oliver?
You would have 2 more minutes.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. So I'm going to have the time to round it up. So what is the idea behind it? It is the idea to find a narrative which is which has a lot of implications, which can be kind of the underlying strength of churches understanding themselves into a modern world, not to work against others or to be apart them, but to really embrace the modern world with all its problems and all its joyfulness, which is there out there, to become part, a vivid part. So there's always the question, why should we actually do it? Why should we give our strength and our powers? And that is kind of the question, and what for? That is kind of the question that the concept tries to answer. So a self-understanding as diaspora can enable minority churches and also majority churches to recognize the multi-layered and dynamic fabric of relationship in which they live, so to actually perceive that they are living in the midst of the world with a lot of relationship, and motivate them to give them strengths to shape them in a constructive way. So in this sense, it is also important to see in which relations do we live and which bridges have we already built, and prioritizing synergy, which are the new bridges and the new fields in which we want to engage to build figuratively new bridges.
Thank you, Markus. Thank you very much for your first part of the lecture. There will be a second part later. I am sure that there is quite a lot of interesting points for discussion. As we are a quite big group, we would like to split up into groups for discussion, to smaller groups. But before we do so, I would like to ask you if you have direct questions to Markus. Sometimes when we have a digital academy like this, people have connection problems. We all don't speak English as our mother tongue. So there may be something which you did not understand well. And this is the occasion to ask Markus for that before we split up into discussion groups. If you want to ask, please use the hand up button in your Zoom, or show it to me. Okay, Alexander Heindl, please.
Okay, one question. Like you say that like the Church of Jesus Christ is shared by all the churches. You mean all the Protestant churches, or you have also kind of view of the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox churches? Because like the Roman Catholic Church and Orthodox churches would have another opinion than you.
Always, ecclesiological concepts have a certain background, and you pointed right to the right spot. This is, of course, a Protestant concept. As the Protestant concept of Leuenberg, which is Einheit in versöhnter Verschiedenheit, so unity in redeemed
reconciled diversity.
Thank you so much. In reconciled diversity, of course, is also a concept, which we offer, which we think which could be actually suitable for all churches. As we know, so far no Catholic churches are part of the CPCE. That is, of course, an offer which Protestant churches make, and think that it could be one step closer to church community, church unity, of course, but it's not. It would actually be very interesting to go into dialogue with the concept. But yes, I totally agree. From the perspective of itself, it is ecumenical, but it can be challenged by other denominations, if that is suited or not.
Yes, thank you. This is, of course, a point where we could go into a deeper discussion. But is there anything else you need to have clear before we go into our discussion groups and need to ask Markus for that? Please use the occasion now.
So in case you did not understand something I said because of connectivity problems or because I was too fast with something, the discussion is later on. You're right, Oliver.
Okay, so well, let us. I can't see anybody who showing up for another question. So I propose to split up into small discussion groups. This is more intensive, and you may have the occasion later to tell us a little bit about that. So when you go into your group, into your discussion group, I would like you to first to introduce each other, yourself, so that you know who is with you in the small group. This is a possibility to get to know a little bit more about your backgrounds, where you're coming from. Second, I have 3 questions to you, which you are invited to talk about. If your talks go into another direction, that's fine as well. And third point is, please come back after 20 minutes, which means 5 minutes after 7 in Central Europe, and you are somewhere else, you switch your time accordingly. So that's 20 minutes time for your small groups. Now the questions. Marcus told us about the concept of diaspora and how this can be reinterpreted, not giving the focus on the minority and issues connected to that, but to the possibilities, which means to not be scattered but interspersed. And if I understood that well, into the world. So my questions are, if you see this concept, what strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and possibilities do you see for this described self-understanding as diaspora in your context, in your situation? Second question would be, what challenges and problems do you face in your situation as a minority or as a shrinking church, if your church is not a real minority so far? And the third question would be, do you see chances that a self-understanding as diaspora may be encouraging and helpful for churches, and in which way? I put the questions also in the chat so that you have them hopefully there when you go to your groups. Can you see the 3 questions? I send it not to everybody. So again, can you see the questions now? Wonderful. I see people nodding. That's a good sign. And I hope you understood what is your task to do, introduce to each other, discuss the questions or something else you have, your issues out of Marcus' lecture. And third, be back at 5 minutes past 7 Central European time. So I now ask Marcel Kehr to distribute us into the discussion groups. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you had good conversations in your groups. My group realized that the time was much too short to really get into a good discussion. Maybe you experienced it similar. We get now into the second part of our evening with the second part of a lecture, and we get again in discussion groups so that we can continue that later. But before we do so, maybe you would like to share. This should not be reports, but maybe somebody would like to say something out of your groups, which what was especially interesting, or which point was very important for you. So there should be room, some minutes to bring that back to all of us. Is there anybody who would like to say something to bring back from the groups to all of us? Lawrence. please switch on your microphone.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Well, it was interesting to see in our group that there is a difference between countries like Denmark and Germany, in which historically Protestant churches played a big leading role in society. And on the other hand, for example, the situation of Vittorio's church in Italy and the Protestants in Belgium, that we are a minority church. So that was the contrast between the two. Now, in a positive way, a shrinking church or minority church is able to have a prophetic role in society with less structures. But on the other hand, there are also some practical problems, like, for example, if you are not using all the churches anymore and you are combining 3 churches to one, let's say the buildings, it could be that you are combining a more conservative part of the church and a more liberal wing together in one church, and that might lead to some practical problems. So that was a bit our discussion. I don't know if I forgot other things, but if I forgot something, the other people from the group can react as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to say something?
Thank you. I can unmute myself, so thanks for unmuting. There was just one question in our group which pondered my mind. Diaspora is not always seen as positive in the Bible, and so isn't there a way to think of, I like the picture of diaspora as seeing our church reality as it is. And could it also be seen as something like seeing the reason to reap and to allow this sadness that church decreases, and also see this theological perspective or vision of going ahead? But shouldn't we like keep both in mind, like the weeping part and being sad for what was left and what we have not any longer, and also like going ahead? So there's not like actionism where we always try to work more and more and more, but also can reflect on what we have left behind.
Thank you very much. That sounds very interesting. And I would like now to give back to Marcus. He was also part of a group and may want to say something out of that, but you can swiftly go on with the second part of your lecture, having in mind what we heard also from the groups. And you have about, not so much, 10 minutes.
Do you understand me? Can you understand me? No.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your contributions. I will say very briefly what I was there in our group, where the opportunities were seen as it could be a narrative which helped actually with these very negative self-understanding and very weeping, or very strongly on the part where we weep, where we are sad. But it was also said so that it could actually be a real help. But that it also has to be seen that, especially when you are becoming a minority, that there are, of course, severe problems since you have some responsibilities. For example, you're getting less in numbers, you don't need a building. So what do you do with the building now? How can you also have legal responsibilities? So something where I would answer, of course, the concept should not be understood in a way of that there are no problems anymore, that we just be happy and work and talk according to the gospel. But in facing these challenges and these responsibilities, there might be a difference in how you do that. If you do it more from a perspective we are getting less important and only see the problem in it, but maybe with a more positive, vision-based and task-based concept underlying behind, you might see or find new creative ways in how to make it out of it, if not a win-win situation, but a win-lose situation. That is something what we had in discussion. So yeah, now to the second part, maybe some 8 minutes The question is, of course, in this lecture, in this digital academy, on participation. And I chose just to focus on a way. I said that with the concept of diaspora in mind, there is a great sense of connectivity, of communion, of being connected, not only in your local, or in your city, on your town, not only in a region, but it could also be on a national level, and of course also on a transnational level, in a international level. Bear in mind that the idea of diaspora is the interspersion of the Church of Jesus Christ, so which leads to this ecumenical move, also across your borders of your country. And now the participation, focusing on participation, that is also something which is strongly needed, since we live in a world where problems are not anymore, well, if they ever were, but which are not anymore on one state or on in itself, or on two states, but where problems are becoming globalized, or where the source and also the solution to problems, or to be making contribution to problems, is per se not possible to do it only in a country itself. Well, of course, think of questions as climate change. It must be an effort from, well, not only Germans or Austrians or so on, as we know, having the UN, United Nations conference in Egypt now. But think of a more concrete problem, for example, which I would like to give a talk on now, which is the problems of Euro orphans. And I would just like to ask you to raise your hands if you have any idea what Euro orphans are. Could you give a hand or a thumb if you know what it is, so that I just get an idea if you know it all, or if I have to explain it from the scratch. I don't see any thumbs, so I will. Well, of course. Thank you, Volkmar and Oliver. Yes. Okay. Euro orphans. Interesting enough, Mario Fischer, the General Secretary of the CBCE, always says when he comes up with the problem of Euro orphans, when he is in talks to State Institute or also to Western countries, he always sees people to get very shy and to be very embarrassed, because it is a problem which has been there for a long time, but which has not been acknowledged. The idea of Euro orphans, or not the idea, the reality of Euro orphans, that in Western countries, richer countries, Germany, Austria, and so on, we have a great need for the care of elderly people. And as all of you know, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough professional personnel to take care of elderly people. Our societies are becoming old and older, faster and faster. So what is the reality? As all of you know, we get these qualified people from Eastern Europe, from Southeastern Europe. Well, but what happens then? Since they come to richer countries to earn the salary, and it is not a weekend job, but it is a full-time job throughout, sometimes 7 days a week, the families of these nurses and nurses are left behind. So in other words, you have generations which are raised not by their parents, but by grandparents and siblings. So in other words, you have the great problem that you tore families apart. In a way, of course, they do it because well, there is they have to earn a better salary. That's what is the motivation. But children are left behind. So there are only holidays where they would actually get to see each other. And of course, another problem is that elderly people in their countries, their parents of the parents, are getting more and more responsibilities. They are being parents for the second time, and not by the age of 30, not by the age of 20 or the late 20s, and not by the age of 40, but sometimes by the age of 40, 50, or 60. So that job is not getting any easier. And of course, for the Euro orphans, so the children which are in the countries, in the more eastern or southeastern countries of Europe, also lack this relation with the actual parents. And what is now the possibility for churches here? How could they contribute? As I said before, this is not a problem where you can work only in one country, because if you work in Austria, like stay with my case, you work with the people who are here, but you don't have to grasp on the church, on the children maybe in the countries and on the elderly people. So this building bridges can be in an international way that church communities always were also places of bridges between the church communities itself. If you think of now the war in Ukraine, for example, these are like kind of contact spaces where all good goods and so on could be can be delivered, and also in this case, it can be these contact zones between the countries. It can be a dialogue. Churches could be a dialogue a zone for many nurses, for example, who share the same problem. They could gather by seeing that and doing some rituals, and also providing some pastoral care for the parents, and also in the countries where the Euro orphans actually are, the same counts for connecting people there in order to build up some synergy and contribution. So that is a help on a very individual level. But also on a more social, ethical level, churches could actually have a advocative function, because of course by bringing people together, of course they can also actually make aware that there is a problem which we generate by the way our world, our Europe actually works. So that is also on a very social, ethical level. Advocacy is something which comes into mind, and yeah, to stand up and to also point out that this is a problem because of social and economical injustice. There are involved many countries in the CPCE project Euro Orphans, in Bulgaria, in Slovakia, in Lithuania, in Germany, in Portugal, which are in Ukraine. And this is becoming, you can see that the churches there are becoming, are building up a network and exchanging, and are a platform for knowledge transfer between them. Oliver, I think probably this is about it, right?
Yes.
No.
Should we try to continue, or is that fine for you?
Yeah, I just wanted to present that as one practical example of a participation beyond the own borders.
Exactly. I wanted to thank you for bringing the example of Euro orphans, and also again mentioning the idea of being a bridging point. You already had that in the end of the first part of your lecture, where we thought of being a bridging point of churches towards outer society, towards your region and surroundings. But now it also got the idea of being part of the solution of a bigger problem. And there may be many things of diaconical questions. Also, you mentioned the point of advocacy work, churches speaking up for others, for the awareness of a bigger problem. So I would like to bring this again in discussions of the groups we had. We to go into the same groups we had so far. You don't need to introduce yourself already. You can jump directly into the discussion, and maybe you have still open questions from the last, but I would like to give you also 2 new questions. And I try to put them into the chat again, and I read it to you. Where does your church already form bridging points? Where and how would you like to contribute as a church to bridging events in the future and be places for encounter and dialogue? And the second question, how can and should relationships, rich relationships of your church be used? What would be the focus of work in your church? And when it is both, what would your church like to receive and what could it share with others? It is actually much more than only 2 questions, so surely enough to talk about and to discuss. Let's go into the groups and we come back in 15 minutes, which is at, or let's say 10 past half, a quarter to 8 to Central European time, 1945. And you will switch your times according to your time zone if necessary. So you have actually 18 minutes time for the groups, and let's jump into the groups again. Welcome back. I think now we are all back in the plenary session. I hope you had good talks in your small groups. And we are almost coming to an end of our evening, but I would like to bring a little bit back what you have been talking about. So we have some 5-10 minutes to hear from your groups. That's not, again, a must. So if you would like to tell something, please tell us. And then we see if we have a little exchange what of our thoughts about our topic of Protestantism and participation in the context of theology of diaspora. Who would like to say something from your talks?
Okay. Hi.
Vittoria, yes, I can
yes,
hear
do you hear me? Okay. So basically, we have shared some thought, and the main point was that so we can basically share our knowledges, our people, so the know-hows, the peoples, and also material goods. So creating networks and understanding ourselves as a multiple diaspora means also to cure the aspect of the church as a body. So basically, starting from 1 Corinthians, we can think of ourselves like a body with multiple branches and members, and this can actually lead to create projects that would be impossible without this kind of collaborations on an ecumenical level, and just also with this kind of meetings that we are making. So I think that it's something that we just could and should do for our future as churches. This is it.
Thank you. Anybody else? I see Marcus' finger. I think you met an important point. Giovanni.
So I agree what Vittorio said, but it could be quite easy because we come from the same church. But I just had afraid about what Vittorio said, because we must remember that if we take us in panic to survive in the society, we sometimes risk to transform what we are originally are. So we are a Valdesian church. We have an our story, we have an our theology, and I saw in some different situations that we tried to have a mystification of things that could be divide us from other churches, especially from the Catholic Church. And we must pay attention about that, and to remember that what we are. This is an important point. So all projects are good, but we must pay attention how we do that project. We are a church, not on or philanthropic things or ONG or a different church about what we are. So just this.
Yes, reminding us of we cannot do everything, and we are a church. Thank you, Giovanni. Who else would like to say something out of your discussions, or even react to what was said?
Okay, now I'm not muted anymore.
Now I can hear. We can hear you. Yes, please.
Yeah, we were talking about, and that seems to connect to what Giovanni just said, even though just briefly. We talked about the difficulty for churches to find a point in society where they can build bridges to. So what is important, and what is the thing about church that can be brought into society and that connects us with the people in the society outside the church. And also we think that churches in Germany as well as in Estonia sometimes have trouble with their image that is displayed or that society has from them. For example, in terms of discussions around sexual abuse, or also discussions around the Russian Orthodox Church with the war and everything else. Yeah, just so far.
Thank you. Are there other reactions? I would like also to ask Markus Hütter to get back to us and react to the reactions.
So yeah, thank you very much for your contributions. There were a lot of contributions which were also very useful for my thinking. To start with the last one I heard from Hannah, also the question, and also from Giovanni. What is it that we should actually focus on? What is the task? Giovanni, you said not to lose yourself as church, and in Italy, as you pointed out before, not to become an NGO, but to be church. And I think to that, that of course, diaspora, either you being in a minority or in a majority situation, the question is always to focus on opportunities, but also on the task. And the definition of the task, I mean, we have the general definition of the task: to be church with and for others, to bring good fruit to us and to others in the world. But these are also, of course, very general perspective, right? Because per se, what in detail is to be done has to be seen also from the church. Which are the resources we have, the people, the very people we have in the community? What can they do? It does not work if you think on a very local level, you have, I don't know, as Giovanni said, you have 25 or 30 people in the congregation, and then they say, okay, we want to host a transnational ecumenical event in our community and invite everyone from everywhere. So, but of course, then you could see how other resources you could actually gain from the outside. But yeah, you have to stay realistic as well towards your own resources, and of course, what is the task in the several state, or in a certain state, which has to be approached, or which could be approached. So that is also definition and of the church itself. I kind of did not see. No, put it that a different way. I think that this is not the solution for everything, but I think it can be a very useful, or could be a very useful concept to navigate through the challenging times ahead, and also a very positive one. And I do not quite remember, Vittorio, if you're still there, but yes, yeah, you said this one point, but I'm not sure if Oliver, we still have time. I see it's only 4 minutes, right? So it's more for last remarks. Okay, sorry, Vittorio. Nice to see you. Yeah,
you just included in your conclusion.
Yeah, my conclusion is that the diaspora is also to be challenged by the main things you said, to give space also for sadness and for weeping, which must not be included in order to be successful in the transformation process to becoming a minority. But I would argue very much that it is tempting to give in sadness and weeping, so that the focus on the goal should be stronger than than to look for the weeping and for what we have lost. That is a conviction I would have. And yeah, thank you very much for your ideas also with the body of Christ. That is of course very fitting from Vittorio. I like the example. And yeah, thank you for your contributions. I'm very eager to know how this is going to be in the future, and also for the present conference in Sibiu. So I'm looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you very much. My impression is that when we talk today, in terms of where are we in our series of discussions on Protestantism and participation, the question of diaspora leads us to where is church participating in society? And now I need to give you an outlook to our next session, which will be in 2 weeks on 1st of December, where we would focus more on what about the participation inside the church? Who comes in, who brings in what to the church, participation within the church. We will have for the first time 2 resource persons to speak in that lecture. So click in again in 2 weeks to our digital academy. For today, I would like to say a big thanks to Markus Hütter, as he brought in his expertise about theology of diaspora. And I would also like to thank all of you for your participation, because there are many of good thoughts coming also from your discussions and from the groups and for whatever you bring in. You may want to have a look on our internet site, which has the address young-theology.eu. And there you can also find a possibility to leave a reply, so that you can give also a kind of feedback to our lecture today, or in general. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope we'll see again in 2 weeks or later. Thank you for participating. Have a good evening, and next time in the next days. Goodbye.